Deputy Chambers, 30 seconds to introduce.
Thanks, Oscar Corla. I want to ask the Minister for Defence his priorities for the Reserve Defence Force in 2019 and if he will make a statement on the matter. In your tenure in the Department of Defence, you've said very little about the reserves, and there's been a recruitment problem that has been outlined by the Reserve Defence Forces themselves. So I'd just like you to update the House on what your plans are to address the diminishing numbers that we're seeing in the Reserve Defence Force.
2 minutes.
The Reserve Defence Force RDF is comprised of the First Line Reserve and the Army Reserve and the Naval Service Reserve. The Government recognises the important role that these three elements of the RDF play in contributing to Ireland's defence capability. The White Paper on Defence 2015 is clear that there is a continued requirement to retain and develop the Reserve Defence Forces and is currently on a developmental path arising from recommendations of the White Paper. Under the current phase of implementation of the White Paper actions, 2 White Paper projects have been identified, and there are important precursors to the establishment of a Special Reserve. The Special Reserve will seek to develop individual members of the Reserve who, by virtue of their professional civilian qualifications, have the competence to undertake specialist tasks. The Government have decided that a panel of such professionally qualified members of the Reserve, to be known as the Special Reserve, should be established. A gap analysis of the skill set of the Permanent Defence Forces will identify potential roles for the Reserve members who possess specialist skills. Options to develop First Line Reserve is also currently being examined. Last July, the Chief of Staff assigned the responsibility of the Director of the Reserve Force to the Director of Combat Support and ISTAR. In this context, plans for 2019 provide guidance across all units and formations with Reserve Defence Force assets in developing their capabilities. This is in line with the single force concept and the role of the Reserve as described in the White Paper for Defence. The focus will be to harness RDF skills and talent, maximising its developed and on the basis of mutual engagement with the PDF. Specific project areas will focus on training, regulation, recruitment, retention and promotions, and will be supported through the RDF and the PDF reciprocal training, mentoring and education. A key ongoing challenge for the Reserve Defence Forces is to recruit and retain personnel. I am aware that there continues to be shortfalls between the current strength figures and those of the establishment, which provides 4,069 personnel, and recruitment is ongoing. The Defence Forces will run 2 recruitment campaigns for the Army Reserve and the Naval Service Reserve this year, one in March and the second in October. Supports being
included in the official report. Deputy Chambers, your first question, and please, 1 minute.
Minister, you told me in a parliamentary question reply just before Christmas that the effective strength of the Reserve Defence Force stood at 1,745 personnel. As with the permanent force, the Reserve has been in some decline for years. While the Reserve had 2,280 effective members at the end of 2015, this had reduced to 2,049 by the end of 2016 and to 1,975 at the end of March 2017. And the agreed establishment strength of the Reserve is 4,069. And whilst you mention in your statement that you want to have, specialist training for the Reserves and to value them and to recruit them, the reality is what the Reserve Defence Forces said themselves at the Oireachtas Foreign Affairs and Defence Committee in 2017, where they said that there's elements within the department that they feel simply could not care less about the Defence Forces. So I think some of the issues that were mentioned at that committee meeting need to be addressed at a policy level, because the numbers are diminishing, and you need to seriously address it, or we won't have a proper reserve.
Minister, 1 minute only.
The issues that were raised at the Oireachtas committee by the Reserve, I know that I got correspondence, and that I know the department replied in conjunction with the Defence Forces to that correspondence, highlighting they raised a number of issues. Those issues were answered and replied to. The effective strength of the Army Reserve and the Naval Service Reserve is the 31st of December 2018. The latest to date for which figures are available is 1799 personnel, of which that are there. Army Reserve 166. 1,666 and the Naval Service Reserve 133. and has strengthened the first line reserve on the 31st December 2018. The latest figure shown available is 288 personnel. But let me state, Deputy, I have previously stated that if people have any ideas about encouraging people, the general public, to get involved in the Reserve Defence Forces, we put a very rigorous recruitment and programme together that is very attractive regarding training and educating.
There are other members waiting.
When they
Final question. Final short question.
I'll be short. No, I think a lot of it relates to there's been a huge breakdown in the rural and regional units of the Reserve Defence Force, and Mr Richardson mentioned at that committee that there were 6,000 applicants received between September 2015 and December 2016, and out of those applicants, 60 were recruited. And that shows the huge mismatch between the numbers who might be interested, but the numbers who actually go on to become reservists. So we've got a kind of a destructive policy where there's an element of there's contagion. So the breakdown of the units are leading to a lack of involvement in proper defence policy. So I think you need to have the reserves as a more integral part of defence policy so that they're actually valued within the whole architecture of defence.
Chief of Staff has appointed a director of the reserve. I said that in my original reply. I think that shows the commitment from the Defence Forces and the value they hold in the reserve. But it is up to the units on the ground as well to encourage members to apply and to join and to try and become members of the Reserve Defence Forces. As I speak to my own colleagues across Europe, they all have the very same issue around the reserve, that there's the same numbers of people that are normally there to apply for the Reserve Defence Forces. You don't have them applying in the same numbers as what they would have had previously. And I've stated to the committee on numerous occasions that if members have any ideas around encouraging members, encouraging young people to join the Reserve Defence Forces, because those people have got absolutely fabulous opportunities because of being members of the Reserve Defence Forces. They don't want to join the PDF, but want to be members of the RDF to show the leadership skills, to show different areas that they can get a specific skill that they mightn't be otherwise able to get.